Welcome to R&G 6 Questions. My name is Roberto Uding and I'm your host for this session. Today we will be talking to Jan Martens about inventory replenishment, 3 reasons why your numbers might be wrong. So welcome Jan. Can you introduce yourself and what is it that you do at R&G?
Okay, thanks Roberto for the opportunity. My name is Jan Martens. I work at R&G since around 2014. Have had career opportunities in chemical companies as well as in more transactional companies. And what stuck with me, what I brought to R&G is a focus on looking at variability, trying to understand what drives variability, to then turn it around and to use it to your advantage. Mm-hmm. So you can see we do this for example in production environments where you look at output per day and the variability in output per day. Mm-hmm. We do this in supply chain environments where you look at your capability on aiming to deliver a customer order on the date and time a customer actually wants it. Mm-hmm. And looking at variability means that you would compare how well you do your actual delivery compared to what customers really want.
Yeah, so basically
that's what keeps me busy.
Yeah, you're the variability man of R&G.
Absolutely variability man, yes.
So Jan, you wrote a blog about inventory replenishment. So why is this topic so important to you?
Well, what you see is that a lot of companies that we work with have a structure where they aim to provide what customers want based on inventory that they have at hand. Mm-hmm. So there are essentially 2 strategies. You could produce to order, so you don't have anything on stock. When an order comes in, you produce and you ship to a customer, or you could have a make to stock environment where you would produce, put it in inventory and then deliver from that inventory when customers want it. And what we see is that a lot of people, a lot of companies, a lot of customers struggle with that last model. Mm-hmm. Because what happens if you receive a customer order and the inventory is not there? That's a stock out situation. Yeah. So that's one side of the coin. The flip side of the same coin is that you might have too much inventory at hand. Mm-hmm. So you tie up working capital. That if you could reduce your inventories, you could use that working capital to further advance your business.
So in this whole inventory replenishment area, what are the major KPIs that you are looking for if you have to manage this?
Well, stock out is key, right? It's something you don't want, but typically when you aim for a service level, so how well would you be able to service customers? The classical aim is around 97.5%, mm-hmm. which means that out of 100 orders, you might not be able to fulfill around 2, right? Mm-hmm. So managing, keeping track of those stock outs is essential to have an understanding how well your service level actually is at any point in time. And then on the other hand, I always would like to look at the age of inventory. Mm-hmm. And then not a financial metric, but a real transactional level. I'd like to know what is the oldest pallet of material that is in my warehouse. Mm-hmm. So also there, look at the variability of aging of raw materials is key. Mm-hmm. And then I think you need to capture your replenishment mechanism that typically relies on a certain lead time. So if I identify a need to produce, I want it in my inventory in about 2 weeks, for example. Mm-hmm. How well is your manufacturing process capable of maintaining that 2-week lead time? Yeah. Shorter is fine, but longer will lead to stock outs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that our colleague Bart Beusmans, he wrote a blog about forecast error. So what is your take on forecast for inventory replenishment? And how do you deal with exceptional events?
Well, there's almost like 3 answers to that question, right? Because on the one hand, our typical arguments, well, let's not be bothered too much by forecasting, because rather than building your inventory model based upon what you might forecast, let's look at your historical demand and look at the variability in the demand to then define the parameters that you need for replenishment to avoid stock outs in the long term. So that's the first answer, right? Mm-hmm. The second answer would be that there could be events on the horizon. So think about suppose you're supplying to a supermarket and you have this big coupon thing coming up in 4 weeks time that typically would drive your demand through the roof. So that would be an exceptional demand. Yeah. And that forecasting helps to understand whether or not these exceptional events are on the horizon. So that would be a good thing. And then the usual challenge we see in forecasting, forecasting numbers can be inflated by many reasons, right? It could be if I'm a salesperson, I'm incentivized on making a certain number, I typically would forecast that number. Because why would I forecast to not make my incentive? So therefore the reliability of forecasting can be quite challenging.
Kind of like gaming the system a little bit.
Gaming the system. And I think the element that is very frequently not considered is what is the point in time that you're actually forecasting? If you're forecasting something 6 months out, that may be that's perfectly fine. But if you're closer to the horizon where you need to make decisions on whether to produce or not, it becomes more challenging to have to rely on your forecast, and the impact of having a forecast that is wrong then becomes bigger.
So you wrote there about 3 reasons why your numbers might be wrong. What are exactly the 3 reasons? Why are your numbers going to be wrong in this area?
Well, I think a couple of things, right? It's the inflation of forecasts that would based on for instance the sales mechanism, or the fact that you have a budget that you're urgently trying to make. So you have this top-down approach of forecasting where your bottom-up number could be completely wrong. I've had an experience working at a company where I came to that site, and up until the parking lot was filled with material that was produced. And so, well, why are you building all this inventory? Well, because the forecast says that this is what we're going to sell. So are you going to sell 50% of your volume in the last 2 weeks of the quarter? Probably not. So why don't you simply stop producing? But so the start of the next quarter, we had a huge working capital issue, way too much cash tied up in inventory. And that is because the mechanisms that drive this forecast, because bottom up, people knew they were never going to make the forecast. And so asking those people, so why did you maintain that forecast? They said, well, if I miss the quarter, that's a painful event that lasts about a week. If I adjust my forecast, every single week of the 13 weeks in a quarter, I have a painful discussion with management. So that's how.
So it's more about managing politics.
It's internal politics that tend to play a role, and there's more a mathematical or statistical element in the answer as well. A lot of the replenishment models rely on statistical data, where a standard deviation is often used to categorize variability of demand. And what we've learned over time is that maybe only 20% of all materials that you would build inventory on follow a normal distribution, statistically normal distribution in demand patterns. So 80% of whatever you want to maintain in inventory deviates from this nice normal probability curve. And therefore the classical estimates on your replenishment levels, so your replenishment quantity and the reorder point when you would like to replenish, tend to be wrong, tend to be overstated. So we have this approach where we look at the model of the demand to then derive better parameters. And historically, we've been able to reduce inventories 10 to 20%.
So also here there's like an 80-20 rule.
Yes. And I think the assumed normality of your data is something that is in many systems that would automatically generate replenishment proposals. I wouldn't say it's the root of all evil, but definitely has an impact on 80% of your items that you want to maintain on stock. Where if you improve your approach, your results will get better.
So to all of our viewers, what would you recommend them to do? How should they deal with stockouts?
Great question. I think what I've seen happening in a demand planner world is that when customers start screaming because you can't deliver, that's always painful, obviously, for everyone involved. The simplest approach would be, let's avoid this in future. So you might up your reorder point, you might increase your replenishment order quantity to avoid the stock out next time. And I think it's a simple solution that typically drives inventory and may not solve your stock out situation. So what I would advise is, rather than just fooling around with parameters, investigate the root cause of the issue.
Yeah.
So was the system okay, but did we not simply not adhere to the rules? Did we skip a replenishment order? Did the production environment reprioritize something that led to a wrong timing of material to arrive? Was this one of those strange events where sales decided or marketing decided to do a campaign without involving the supply chain that led to a spike in demand that could have been foreseen?
Mm-hmm.
So I think investigation of root causes of stockouts are key to finding solutions, other than it's like using a blindfold. You just up your parameters and create more inventory, but that might not solve your problems.
Yeah, then you know for sure your numbers will be wrong.
Well, your stockouts could reduce, right? Which is a good thing, but your inventory typically tends to be too high, which is a waste of working capital. One of the things that what we have done, so that's we've built a model that, based on the historical demand, would be able to say, well, let's look at the historical demand and see if that normal probability distribution is a good fit. So that would work for 20% typically of your materials. And for the 80%, we have around six different approaches to capturing the level of variability to derive a replenishment per quantity and a reorder point. That serves the purpose in a better way. It reduces stockouts and at the same time reduces inventory as a whole, which is a good thing. And it's a tool that's available for customers that work with us in an online environment. So that's the online software that R&G has available for all those customers that really want to manage that 80-20 rule. Yeah,
this is where you need to be. So
avoid
just get in touch
and avoid your inventory of becoming too old.
Great, wonderful, Jan. Well, Jan, I want to thank you for all of your advice and wise answers for us and for our viewers.
Yeah.
So this was R&G 6 questions. I hope you've enjoyed this session, and I hope to see you next time. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.